The crisis begins, curiously enough, at a dinner party McGeorge, Bundy, and his wife were hosting in Washington. And Bundy got a phone call from Ray Klein, one of the deputy directors of CIA, reporting that aerial reconnaissance photos showed that the Soviet Union was deploying intermediate-range nuclear weapons on the island of Cuba. Now, you would think that any national security advisor getting this information would immediately contact the president. Bundy made a very curious decision. He decided to go back to his cocktail and dinner party. And he said subsequently that I decided that a good night of rest was what the president really needed rather than any kind of hastily called meeting.
Live today, for tomorrow we may die.
So at 8 a.m. the following day, Bundy found President Kennedy in his pajamas, in bed, reading the morning papers, and he dropped a proverbial bombshell and told him that the Soviets were deploying these weapons. What subsequently happened over the following 13 days is a story that's well known. As far as Bundy's concerned, he in essence argued three different positions over the course of that 13 days. In fact, within the first 72 hours, he had advocated first airstrikes, then a quarantine. He advocated doing nothing, and then he reversed his support for a quarantine and then advocated airstrikes again, which was a proposal that Kennedy ultimately rejected because he knew, based on his conversations with Robert McNamara and others, that the military could not provide him with an assurance that if they launched those airstrikes, they could hit every target. They could knock out every one of those missiles. And what we now know, decades later, and this is critically important because it really is the difference between what could have been a major nuclear disaster, is that there were 162 nuclear weapons on the island of Cuba, including 90 tactical nuclear weapons that would have been used to repel an American invasion or airstrikes.
I don't remember, Gordon, maybe you know, how many of them were assembled and ready to go, but they were certainly in the process of assembling them and making them ready to go. And
well, I'm distinguishing here between the intermediate range missiles that were not yet operational and 162 warheads that were on the island, including 90 tactical nuclear weapons that would be used to repel an invasion, which was expected if we launched these airstrikes.
And my understanding is Khrushchev had signed the order giving control over use of the weapons to the local commanders on the scene, whom Fidel Castro at that point was so angry at the United States that he was willing to see Cuba destroyed. He was furious that they didn't use those weapons, is my understanding of the situation.
I don't think it's widely appreciated how close we were to a cataclysmic disaster. It was really, in the words of an author who's written a recent book on it, we were 1 minute to midnight.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.